Hi, I'm talking to you today because in the last couple of weeks there have been two pieces of spectacular television that have completely drawn me in, and the stories have stayed in my mind because they're so extraordinary and so unbelievably believable. The first one is Dirty John, and I saw it because I clicked on my Netflix and I saw a trailer. I was like, oh yeah, this will be interesting just to see how it goes. I like Eric Bana, he's okay, and that Connie Britton from American Horror Story. It'll be good. It'll be interesting, based on a true story. See, because I love my true stories. So I'm watching it, and this beautiful, successful interior designer who lives in Orange County is meets online this handsome, charming guy. He's a bit odd, but he's lovely to her. He adores her. He tells her how beautiful she is, and just becomes her boyfriend and part of her life very quickly. And both her young 20 something daughters don't take to him at all. Just feel there's something creepy about this guy. Things don't add up. He says he's a doctor, he's an anesthetist, and he goes to work every day in scrubs, but they're the same scrubs, and he drives their mum's car. And why is he driving her car? And where does he go all day? To the point where one of the daughters actually puts a tracker on the car. Anyway, so you're drawn into this story and you see the reason why she would want to be with him. She marries him very quickly and does this thing where he drives a wedge between her and her daughters because he wants her, and he's basically, you know, getting control by getting all the people that care about Deborah away from him so that he can manipulate her and gaslight her and take her money. The bottom line is he's a drug addict, so he's not only stealing drugs from the hospital where he works, but of course he's stealing money from her for the same end. Anyway, I won't tell you any more about that because I want you to watch it. It was based on a podcast of a story that happened in Los Angeles, in California. So then, of course, I had to go and find the podcast and listen to the real players in the story telling their side of the story, even though I knew what the end was. And then there's a documentary where the players. So every time you see an iteration of the story, you learn a little bit more about this man, who was incredibly manipulative and really quite evil. And the fact that a smart woman who was just a bit lonely and was drawn in by his attention, you can see how easily it can be done and also how careful you have to be. And this idea that everybody has a story, that everybody has something to say about their life or about a certain period in their life. And Deborah Newell, certainly, she had to tell her story, which made her look foolish, which she's ashamed of the fact that she put herself and her family in mortal danger. And it's really, really interesting to see how we can talk ourselves into a situation. Which brings me on to the second piece of television I saw this week, which was Leaving Neverland. Oh my gosh, these two boys who say they were consistently and systematically sexually abused by Michael Jackson. My hero. They say you should never meet your heroes, right? These boys met their hero when they were very young and very impressionable. And a lot's been said about it this week. There's a lot of documentaries. I've just watched the Oprah Winfrey interview with the two boys and Dan Reed, the filmmaker. The audience is filled. You can see it on YouTube. The audience is filled with men, survivors of sexual abuse, and not just men, but men and women who are survivors of sexual abuse. And you can see they all agree that the pattern that was followed by the abuser, who slowly ingratiates themselves not just to the child but to the family, everything's wonderful. And imagine it's Michael Jackson, somebody of the size and power, star power. And I think what it says, as much as anything, these 2-hour films, is how easily we are beguiled by famous people and celebrity. I mean, it's one of the most insidious elements of our society and our culture. Everybody wants to be a movie star, and second best to that, they want to meet one or be the friend of one or be in the presence of one. And when they are, they sort of take, I call it the famous person's disease. I developed this expression quite a few years ago, like 25 years ago, when I saw some of the friends that I knew from early on become famous and rich and different and very far removed from me. And I would see people around them, and I call it famous person's disease because the person is the carrier. It's the main carrier of the virus, and they infect everybody around them to the point where they're not thinking straight. The famous person, especially if they became successful very early on, they find it hard to break out of that bubble that's created around them, and so they hang out with other famous rich people. That's easier than being with their ordinary friends from whenever. Professional relationship, the sharp pointy end of everybody's job is the famous person. But if it's acquaintances or people who meet them, I mean, I've stood at parties having conversations about some of the most banal subject matters with my famous friend who politely nods and smiles and is interested in that person because they don't want to talk about their work or their stuff because the non-famous person knows all about that. There's no real news there. It's what's so-and-so like to work with. Oh, I really enjoyed that film. But they don't want to talk about their work. Usually they want to, they project it onto the individual, and it's an odd dynamic. You can see that the person who's enamored with the celebrity or the famous person sort of isn't themselves. So imagine these little boys and their families being taken to Neverland, flown first class, given literally the right royal treatment, and the price these children paid was having to become complicit in these sexual acts that they were told if they told anybody they'd go to prison for the rest of their lives. Michael would go to prison, had to stand in court and lie again because they felt so protective of Michael, even though he was abusing them or he had abused them. It's really a fascinating story that these boys finally feel free in their 30s to say something. And in the Oprah Winfrey interview, it wasn't until they had their own children, their own sons, that they realized how awful it would be if something happened to them. And then the relationship they both have with their mothers, who were completely seduced as well, the whole group. And I think if there's any lessons to be learned, it's just, famous people are real people too. Maybe not Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson he was the sort of pop star and icon that we don't really make anymore. And if we do, I think we're far more aware of them because they tweet all the time, or they, there's so much that comes out about them that we question a lot more. But back in the 80s and 90s, when there wasn't the internet, when you were lucky if you got to see somebody in concert at Wembley Stadium. I saw the Bad tour at Wembley Stadium in 1987, and I had dreams about it for 2 weeks afterwards. This performer, this essence, this incredible entertainer, what he brought to the stage and what he gave all of us as audience members was extraordinary. And now, 30 years later, to learn that all the while he was abusing these little boys is, as a fan, I was a dancer. We choreographed routines to his music. I put a mirror up to the television with a video of Thriller so that I could learn the steps in the mirror so that they were the right way around when I taught them to my dance class. I mean, it's the death of a hero. And now they're like, oh, don't play his music on the radio, don't do this. What are we going to do? What are those of us who grew up listening to that music, singing his music? My choir sings Man in the Mirror. Every time we get to the final refrains, the final ad-libs, it's so moving. But maybe Michael Jackson he knew himself too, and he was looking in the mirror, and he wasn't talking about changing the world. Maybe he really was talking about changing himself. and he never got a chance to do that. And these boys will never be who they should have been without that abuse, and that's a terrible thing. And what they say in the Oprah Winfrey interview is that now they want to turn something that was bad into good and help other young people speak their truth. And I hope that's true.